Hi guys, this is Daz from DazMode.com, computer water cooling store in Canada, and this is my part 7 of complete water cooling guide. From my experience, for people who just start their water cooling as a hobby, selection of tubing and corresponding fittings probably the most hard part to understand because there's not much information around about it. In reality, it's very simple, and let me show you how to select your parts. And when you understand it for first time, after that it became really working in the park. Let's discuss how to select your tubing. In fact, it's not that difficult. In most cases, you only can see two most commonly used sizes in the stores. One is called half-inch, and it's like this, there's a size, or you have a 3/8, which is slightly smaller. In the initial stage, don't worry about impact on performance. Also, it feels like bigger tube will give you better performance because more water flowing through it. On the practice, the difference between two is so little that you shouldn't really bother about it. So just select the one which looks nicer from your personal preference, because you have your motherboard and have your tubing crossing it, and some people like it to have a bigger size like this, and other people saying no, I like a smaller size like this. So you decide what size of the tubing is more appealing for you visually and stick to that size for your entire build, and this will determine the size of the fittings that need to be attached to the size of tubing you selected. After you decide on the size of the tube, next step, you decide if you want to bother with color. The cheapest option to go is obviously non-UV reactive transparent tubing. It's always the cheapest one. If you're on a tight budget, don't sweat too much. You just go with the transparent tube and your selection is done. If you would like to do some color scheme for your build, then you have variety of choices. Typically for the smaller tubes there are more choices available than for the bigger tube. But you decide what you want to do. First of all, if you care about UV reactive properties of the tube. If you do, then your choices became a little bit bigger, because some tube has property to be changing color with UV light. So you can see this is a yellow tube, but it starts glowing as a acid green when you have light on. And you have a red UV reactive tube, orange, green, and stuff like this. So you see, I take light away, it's green like this, and you get closer, and green became more milkish color. So when you determine what kind of tubing you would like to use and what color of the tubing you'd like to use, you're pretty much done. This is black tube, by the way, so you see it can glow blue under UV light. So anyways, so you select your size, you select your color, and then you need to know how much tube you need. I would say that for the simple CPU loop or one component CPU loop, really you need only maybe 5 or 6 feet. But it's your first build, you might cut something wrong, so add a few feet more. So order 9 feet, 10 feet, and that will cover one component. If you have things mounted outside of the case, then you need to estimate how far your parts is away from the case so you can run tubing properly. Because I know some people, they have radiator mounted like in their basement while they sit on the main floor, so they might need, I don't know, 20 feet of tube just to run water through it. So, but if you mount everything inside, 9-10 feet will be more than enough. Stick to it. Don't overbuy it. Next thing that you need to know about tubing is a little bit more information about sizing. There's two sizes that belongs to each tube. One is the size outside of the tube, called outside diameter, and the side inside of the tube, which is called inside diameter. Inside diameter is, I would say, probably more important, because that's universally described what size of fitting you need to use. So this half-inch inside, so the outside diameter of the tube should be half-inch. So if it's smaller fitting like this, it wouldn't, you can't fix it to it, so it's falling out. So you have a proper size, then the two parts will mesh together and you can connect them. The outside diameter matters only when you use compression fittings. We'll talk about it a bit later. Okay, now as we establish how to select your tube, which size we want, what color we need, and how much, how long it needs to be, let's look into the fittings part. For anybody who goes to the anybody store, you open fittings section, you have hundreds of those, and it's really confusing. People get panicked. It's not that difficult. Let's buy it piece by piece out of mystery and look what you really need. The purpose of fitting is just to connect piece of tube to the component of your water cooler component, like CPU block. And for that purpose, each fitting has two ends. One end is always standard, 1/4 inch threads. And those threads can be found on any CPU block or GPU block, radiator, reservoir, name it. It's all the same, so one side is always on the component side, so don't worry about it. It's only old days, maybe 5 years old or 4 years old, when people use different sizes. Now everybody gets standardized on 1/4 inch, so one size is okay. So what you need only to match when you select your fitting, that other side will match the size of your tube. So inside diameter of the tube match outside diameter of your fitting. Then two will match, and you can put one into other. Now, in most cases, you will have to select between two kinds of fittings. One is called barbs, and barb is just a simple piece of tube which has threads on one end and friction tube on other end. So when you put two together, barb sit tight on the tubing, and that's how it works. In most cases, although the friction more likely will be okay for you, it's recommended to use additional secured device that's called clamp that you put on top of your tube, and you just make connection even tighter with the clamp. It can be either worm type like this one, so you turn the screw, make it smaller, cost $1 in any hardware store. You can buy some cheap plastic ones. It's not very good in terms of when you use them and lock them, they're really hard to take off, and they're not as strong as the metal ones, but they cost almost nothing. So this second type of clamp you can use. Or the most popular type is a compression type. And you see it's like a spring. You press on it, make it bigger, slide on your tube, release, and my hand's just not strong enough to do it, but basically that's what you do. Just put it on top of your tube, and it's hold tube on a barb very tight. So this is the first type. Barb, the cheapest possible way to go water cooling. They cost like $20 per 10, so that's the most people start with. The second option is to use a compression fitting. Compression fittings is essentially a variation of the barb, and it has two parts into it. One part is actual look like a barb. Another part is a special cup that attach your tubing and secure your tubing on that barb on top of it. So usually it looks like this. You have a piece of tube, you have a cup that goes on top of it, like this. And so what you do, you connect tube to compression fitting the same method as you connect to any barb, but instead of using clamp, you slide this cup on and screw it. And that will fix your tube on that barb very tight. You can't take. This kind of fitting is more expensive, and for that reason lots of people like go for the barb. But there's a few things that you need to consider when you select between two. Barb is better because it's cheaper. Compression is better because it's easy for maintenance. Let's say you'd like to change your build or you'd like to clean it, whatever. If you put barb on tube, let's do it here. Press it. You see? So now you'd like to disassemble your loop. Would like to do that. So you either need to cut tube or use excessive force. So it's not that easy for maintenance. With the compression fitting, all you need to do, you unscrew the cap and you disassemble tube. You see, much easier. For that reason, I'm personally being a lazy person, I only use compression. I don't want even to bother with barbs. So unless you're really dying for the barbs looks, with clamps possibly, I really recommend to think about compression. Lots of people saying, oh, it's too much money. But think about this. Like every time CPU changes or you change your graphical card, that component, this costs you like $100, probably wouldn't fit your next build. So you need to change all the time. The same like with any hardware. So you change your motherboards, your CPUs, everything. Fittings is a basic building block of your water cooling build. You will buy it, you probably will use, like, I don't know, I use my fittings for 3 years and no need to change it because this is just freaking piece of metal. Nothing happened to it. So you buy it once, you use it forever. So also initial investment a little bit more, instead of, let's say, I don't know, $2-3, you pay, could be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Different manufacturers charge different money. You pay more, but you have easier maintenance and you use them forever. Unless you'd like to change the size of them or go different color, something like this. But really, if you don't, it's really good investment. And I seriously recommend it. So, speaking about those two, any other kind of fittings is just created to make your life easier. The very first type of other kind of fittings you need to look is angled fittings. Why you need to do that? That's the thing. When you need to connect two pieces of component with very close to each other, in order to do that, if you have a really long piece of tube, you can do loop no problem like this. But it not always look nice. So when you start to make it look nicer but make it shorter, what's happened, at certain point tube will collapse. And that's what you don't want to have. Because no flow, kaput your system. Right? So the question is how you can connect two close components, make it nice connection between them without collapsing your tubing. And that's how the angled adapters and fitting coming into the play. And which one you need, it depends of exactly layout of your board, because you might have 45-degree adapter, or you might have 90-degree adapter or fitting. This compression fitting 90-degree, this compression fitting without cap for 45-degree, right? That's nobody will help you really. All you need to do, try to draw your system, to try to visualize how tube will go, and try to guess what kind of angled adapter will help you to make connection without excessive bending of the tube. For example, you go from the motherboard and you go away from the motherboard and you get connected to, let's say, graphical card. So you have 90-degree bend. It might work as is, or if you want to go under the angle, then obviously 45 and 45-degree on both ends will help. Right? So what I'm trying to say here, you can use straight cheapest fittings, barb or compression for your entire build, but you need to use more tubing for that, because you compensate bending with a large amount of tube. If you would like to make a more like neat setup and run tubing shorter, then you have to help yourself with the angled fittings. So they either can be part of the fitting itself, like compression fittings, which is 45 degree, or you can buy so-called adapters. For example, this 45 degree adapter, and what you do, you take your straight compression fitting, you attach it to your adapter, and you get your 45 degree adapter. And you can use obviously multiple adapters to make 90 degrees and so on and so forth. Let's look into the finishes. It's not that important, but nevertheless. More likely you will see three kind of finish for your fittings. One is a black, usually most expensive. It's very appealing for many people, but keep in mind that black fitting is the black color. It's actually paint. So this fitting is just spray paint on the metal. So they're very easy to scratch, so you should be careful with them. If you scratch them, you can see brass inside, which is yellow. So those black color looks sleek, but requires special attention. The most common one is a silver, that usually are just plated with chrome, or can be silver, or in most cases nickel. So the silver, those are the cheapest one. They're quite durable. Or you might have a variation, it's called black nickel. They're kind of grayish. So they're still shiny, but they're not as white as the silver ones. So you can select whatever works better for your color selection, for your tubing, for your motherboard. I would say that majority of people use silver fittings because they're cheaper and very durable. After that probably goes black color, and the least popular is gray. But again, there are no rules. You can select whatever you want, and it's obviously no effect on performance or anything like this. So, one thing I didn't mention, but it's important to keep in mind if you decide to use compression fittings that I recommend you. There's both sizes of your tubing play effect when you select compression fittings. Why? Because you not only need to match inside diameter of the tube to put your barb portion on, you also need to make sure that the cup, secure cup, can be put on the tubing. So the cup should match outside diameter of the tube. It's very important. So when you select the both tube and compression, look on both sizes. Let's say you buy 3/8 inside diameter tube and outside diameter 1/2 inch. So the same sizes should be mentioned on compression fitting. So this compression for 3/8 tube with outside diameter of 1/2 inch. So then the cup will fit the fitting properly. You can put it on, you can slide it and secure your fitting. Then they match perfectly. There could be different sizes, especially for 1/2 inch tubing, that the wall thickness can be different. Can be 3/4 or can be 5/8 and whatever. So you make sure that when you select your tubing and compression fittings, you pay attention to both numbers. If they're the same, you're good. If not, you might not be able to put cup on. Another question that quite often I get asked, is it okay when you put cup on that you still have a gap between cup and the barb section of compression fittings? Yes, that's normal. Just secure it with the strength of your hand and make sure that gap exists. Why? Because this gap is the size of your thickness of your wall. If you screw it hard enough to make them meet, this will essentially means that you cut your tube through. Some people do that. But so when you put you cap on, yes, gap is normal, so don't worry about that. So I hope selection of the fittings get a little bit easy. I might do a separate video for specialized fittings to look why you need them, but for the beginner, decide you want barbs or you want compressions. You want barbs, all you care, inside diameter of the tube, match outside diameter of your barb. If you use compression, you need to pay attention both sizes, inside and outside diameter of the tube, to make sure that both barb portion and cap portion will meet. And you're golden. Just go with simple stuff. If you will need more adapters later, something you'd like to optimize it, you always can come back and add more parts to your order. But to the start, you can just go with a few straight fittings and few angled fittings. I usually recommend to go 50-50. It's never hurt. Or you can go all straight and buy several angled adapters, which can be used in any part of your build, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility. Also, two components more expensive to buy than the single component which is already angled. So lots of possibilities. Well, I hope this subject a little bit less confusing for you after this video than it was in the beginning, and thank you for watching and coming back with more videos to finish my complete water cooling build. Take care, guys.